Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm thrilled that you're here today. I'm here with Russell Case.
Good morning, everyone.
And the rock star, I guess maybe grassroots country folky star, Amy Priya.
Ate, my older sister.
Yes.
Are we also pinsan? Are we just brother and sister?
Oh, I don't know. We can be whatever you want to be, Russell.
Yeah. We're having a label-less conversation.
Oh dear, with the labels again. My stepmother is Filipino, and so not mother-in-law, stepmother, and I have a little brother. I'm kuya to my little brother.
Aww,
Yeah,
cute.
so
Very cute.
I claim cousinship to all Filipino people.
Of course, because we're all related. You know that, right?
Yeah, I know.
And you grew up there, right? You grew up in the Philippines, Amy?
A little. My very, very earliest memories, my early childhood.
Yeah.
I was born there in Manila.
Yeah.
But I lived there until I was about 3. So just the itty bit, just the very, very beginning.
Have you been back?
Yeah, I go actually back pretty regularly. I haven't been back since COVID. But I go back when the world was, quote, I guess more normal, like COVID. I would go back usually like every 2 to 3 years, I think.
Oh,
yeah.
nice.
I still have some family there.
Yeah, your parents moved here. Are they still here?
No. The notes say that Amy was raised in Jamaica.
Oh.
So that's not the United States.
No. Jamaica. Oh, yes, it is the United States. It was raised in Jamaica, Queens.
Is that a thing? Jamaica Queens?
Jamaica Queens is a thing.
Is that different from the island in any way?
Very probably.
Yes.
Can you describe
That's the correct answer? If I said anything else, that live in Queens would be very upset with me.
Can you describe for our listeners the differences between Jamaica the island and Jamaica the Queens?
Jamaica the Queens, yes, Jamaica the Queens is a neighborhood in the Queens County of New York City.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I only lived there. That's where when my parents emigrated, we originally lived, and I was only there for approximately a year or so until we settled just a tiny bit north of New York City in Orange County.
Oh, that's in California.
No,
that's one of my favorite TV shows, The OC. That's a great show.
We are basically going to just confuse everyone about geography on this podcast.
I'm constantly confused about American geography because there's so many towns named the same.
It's true.
In different parts of America. It is like kind of a confusing place.
Like Springfield.
Yeah.
There's a Springfield everywhere.
Yeah, or like Salem.
How nice it must have been to settle in a place and you'd say, I'm going to name this Springfield. That must have been really nice.
People liked it.
Can you describe the orange, there must be like orange groves in Orange County. What is that like growing up?
Oh, no. I have no idea why they named it Orange County. I have no clue. Definitely no orange groves there. There's a good amount of apple orchards, so perhaps they just got confused.
Yeah.
It's the beautiful fall color.
Yes, it is very beautiful up there. Actually, now that, in hindsight, now that I don't live there anymore and I live in, a very urban environment, it's amazing to go back up there and just actually really understand how beautiful it is. It really is very beautiful. This is the time of the year to be there, I think.
Yeah.
Were you nestled into a Filipino community in Orange County, or were you different?
Oh, no, I was very, very different. I think the area's changed quite a bit since I grew up there. But when I was there, it was not the most diverse area in the world at all. The Asian population was minimal, very, very minimal. In fact, just in general, like the population of any sort of immigrant population, people of color, was very small, very, very small. Again, I believe, I don't live there. I haven't lived there for decades, but it's changed quite considerably since then. A lot of New Yorkers have sort of like eventually ended up there, especially recently.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so the area is changing for the better.
Yeah.
I would definitely say for sure, in my opinion. Um, but yes, it was very different when I grew up there.
Did your family speak Tagalog?
Yes. The way it kind of worked in my kind of immediate household was my parents pretty much spoke Tagalog exclusively with each other.
Uh-huh.
Um, and they tended to speak English to us. That was their kind of first initial
Right.
kind of like contact, was always to kind of speak English to us. And I'm not sure exactly. I'd have to ask them why they made that decision. I think perhaps it was to just kind of like really integrate their children into American culture and really learn how to speak English well. But whenever they wanted to say something that they didn't want anyone else to understand, of course, they would speak to us in Tagalog too.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
My mom would leave us, if she had to go out and leave us notes on the door of the house, she would always write them in Tagalog.
Oh.
So
Wow.
we could all read
Nice.
them, but like anybody else who came to our front door, like, I
Would
don't
have no
know,
idea.
the
Yeah.
encyclopedia salesman, they had those things back in those days, and
Yeah.
et
The
cetera,
back
et
door
cetera.
the back
The
door is
Jehovah's
open.
Witnesses,
Yeah, let
they,
yourself
they
in.
couldn't
Yeah.
read the sign. Only their
Yeah.
kids could read the sign.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's cool.
but
That's
yeah,
fun.
yeah.
Yeah. And you did all of your schooling there?
I pretty much did all of my K through high school there.
Mhm.
Yes, I did. I was the only sibling that did that. All of my
Oh,
brothers and sisters are older than me, and they were schooled partially in the Philippines and partially in the States. So,
Oh wow.
but
right. Yeah.
I'm the little one. I'm bringing up the rear, and so
Yeah.
I actually, yeah, I was so young when we moved here that I grew up completely and schooled completely here in the States.
Yeah, you're basically a New Yorker.
Oh yeah.
I wonder if you could give us a picture of Amy as a 10-year-old in Orange County, and like what were you into? What did you like doing? What if people found you in the house or found you what would you be doing?
That's fun. Interesting that you mentioned that specific year, because that year was actually, I don't know, I think probably, um, I would say that perhaps aside from moving from the Philippines to the States, that was probably my next most, quote, significant year. Because when I was 10 years old, I found dance.
Oh,
Um,
Oh.
nice.
Yeah. So that was the first year that I started actually like studying any sort of dance forms, like formally.
Mhm.
And that pretty much steered the direction for the rest of my life, I'd say. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, movement and that
Uh-huh.
connection to the body and
Uh-huh.
yeah,
And to
what kind
music as well.
and
Mhm.
music? Yeah, yeah, it's a beautiful integration of both those passions of yours.
Was that
Mhm.
like an hour after school or 3 hours after school, like every day? Like that was your life then?
Well, I think it started small,
Mhm.
and then, but it escalated quickly. Let's
Yeah.
put it that way. Um, I think it was
Reminds me of
just,
my drug use.
yeah. But it was definitely like, I mean, we can allude to this as far as like my practice as well, but it was kind of, you know, I was in a, whether I knew it or not, I think I was in a little bit of a search mode at that point,
Mhm.
trying to find something. Sports did not resonate with me at all when I was
Mhm.
young. The competitive aspect of sports was just such a turn off to me. And I knew immediately I didn't fit into that kind of a mold, which
Mhm.
was very challenging where I grew up. But and I needed, I think, to find, and my parents probably also probably thought this in the back of their heads, too, that I needed a physical outlet.
Mhm.
And so this finally provided me with something like that, which, and it was much more of a kind of like a bonding kind of physicality as opposed to like, a team A, team B kind of
Right.
physicality.
Rivalry.
And that really resonated with me
Mhm.
as a little one. And so, yes, when I found it and I got very excited and passionate about it, I think my parents were pretty amazing. They were very, very supportive of it and sort of
Mm.
just kind of like really fed me into it as much as I wanted to. So, yes, it
Amazing.
escalated quickly.
And did you want to become like a professional dancer? Was that like your dream when you were kind of growing up?
Sure, when I was little, definitely.
Mhm.
I didn't really ever think I was going to find anything else that would excite me as much as dancing.
Mhm.
So I pursued that for quite a while,
Mhm.
many, many years, like into my teens and like even
Mhm.
into my early 20s as well.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that was a pretty huge part of my life in the early goings.
Yeah.
I sometimes feel like we don't give children enough credit for these kind of profound choices that they make, or even say mystic experiences that they might be having that maybe they don't share with us, or maybe they don't quite understand. And it just reminds me that when I was in the fourth grade, they had introduced a yoga class to our school, and I think I was in Illinois that year, and I had like these kind of profound experiences just staring at the wall or staring at the ceiling during the yoga class, and I was like, this is really incredible. can could you point to something at that time that explains your current position as a fellow mystic?
Oh boy, I'm trying to put myself in like my 10-year-old self and in my shoes.
Could be a 12-year-old self.
Or a
12-year-old self,
7-year-old, or a
yeah.
7-year-old?
I don't know. I mean, I just I think when I think kind of in early days, I think I was able to discover and understand early on that I wasn't like other kids that I was growing up
Mhm.
with.
Hmm.
And I didn't really think I could pinpoint exactly why until I was a little bit older. But I
Mm.
had that sense, that feeling that I was different. And because of that, I think, and I was just, I was very young and just developing, obviously, in so many ways. Um, I was very self conscious, I'd
Mm.
say. And just kind of like about how I looked, how I presented
Yeah.
myself, what I said,
Mhm.
etc., and how I reacted to things, people, and
Mhm.
situations. I was very, very sensitive to that. But I felt like when I was dancing, especially like once I kind of had that kind of sense of being able to kind of not focus specifically on technique, but just kind of dance, I guess, quote, on my own terms.
Mm.
Um, it was kind of the only time I was able to completely let go.
Hmm.
Um,
Mm.
and just kind of just exist, so to speak, and
Yeah.
not worry in the back of my head about, what other people were thinking. And
Mhm.
so I think that I guess there you go. That would be my first kind of little kind of taste of this whole idea of like the subconscious level of things and what it's
Mhm.
like to exist on that plane as opposed to just
Hmm.
like being down there with like all these other people, you know.
Yeah,
Like a kind
yeah.
of flow state and an awareness of being in a
Yeah.
flow
Mhm.
state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love that you bring that up. It's interesting. I haven't thought about that for a long time, but that element of like when you're performing as a dancer, there's like a little bit of a disassociation with your personality. And
Absolutely.
so it's
Yeah.
like
What does that mean?
it's just like you don't have a personality. There's no you really. It's like that first sort of experience of there is no you. Like there's no identity there. There's just like the movement and the moment
Oh.
and like the music and the just like, yeah, it is a flow state. It's like the what is it? The PCC? Is that what it is?
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
it
part of your
turns
brain
off.
is completely off. And so, and the moment, if it does switch on, if you are like, oh, I wonder, if you start thinking about yourself and become self-conscious, then it's like, that's when you like make a mistake or something like, you get like off beat, or that's the moment that things kind of get disrupted. So you really learn to like not allow that self-consciousness to enter at all, because that's like not helpful.
The posterior cortical cortex.
Yeah,
it's the eye center where if it's on, you feel self-conscious, and if it's off, you're in a flow.
And so then it's like super liberating, right? Because it is like the one time you're completely disassociated from your personality
and self-consciousness.
But at the same time, which it's the poetic thing is like you're still somehow also very embodied, obviously, because you're using your body as a vehicle for this thing.
Yeah.
And also, but yeah, I mean, like you said, when you are able to get into that place, that's when the best performances happen.
Yeah.
And, like where you just kind of get out of that whole kind of ego state. And it's interesting just talking about it, how ridiculously parallel it is to a yoga practice, like a solid, like
a really good one,
pure yoga practice. Exactly.
I didn't really like make that connection in quite that direct way before, so it was cool listening to you describe that, because I was like, yeah, that is actually something that I mean is maybe unique at a young age to have those experiences, right? Where you do have that actual like space and time of being like immersed in your body with your breath, with music, with the moment, with the movement, like, and not feeling like any sense of self really, which is fascinating.
Yeah. I was also having those experiences in football as well, where I can see the personality turn off. I'm moving, but without making choices. I'm observing without making judgments. And then I'm acting without choosing to act. And, say I'm when I was like a middle linebacker and I'm tracking a running back through the line, and then I saw the gap and went for it and tackled. It was all without self. And this conversation is just kind of bringing me right back into that moment of consciousness. It's really wonderful.
It's exciting when you can find stuff like that. I mean, it's definitely like not exclusive to any one thing. I think it's just a matter of finding each particular person's jam, your thing, and and integrating it into your lives. It can be art, or again, like you said, sports for some people. And so like anything like that. I mean, I think any kind of a outlet that people get like super passionate about obviously has that element, that possibility of getting to that place. So
even like that expression, like losing yourself in it, right? It's like kind of embodying that, what we're talking about, that space of like not having an attachment to your sense of self.
So that's exciting. It just like thinking about our son as well. Like he's I've claimed him as my child. He's just joined the elite parkour team,
the Breathe Elite team,
and so he's having like a host of experiences there that he's not able to articulate. But he's just become a super passionate person for this thing. He's 11, and so like something's happening there.
There you go. Yeah, I think it's, if you can't articulate it, I think that definitely is a good sign that it's affecting you in a very, very kind of deep other layer kind of a way.
And he also has taken up the bass guitar as the first step to doing the stand-up bass, which is something that you do, right?
That's something that I do, indeed. Yeah, that's amazing.
Start?
Well, I started with an electric as well. Not as early as he did.
Yeah.
But I started with an electric. Oh God, I don't know how many years ago now. It's got to be at least like 15, close to 20
Mhm.
years ago. And then the stand up sort of evolved over time as, um, I guess, the music that we were listening to, me and my partner,
Yeah.
or listening to, sort of evolved over time. And the music we started making started evolving over time. The stand up bass sort of integrated itself kind of
Wow.
very organically into the
Yeah.
sound. So,
Wow.
and now, I can't imagine living without it. I can't imagine playing without it. We were actually just in California doing a series of performances, and I did not bring the stand up bass with me. But so I used an electric, and it was still a really amazing trip, but I missed it almost immediately. So,
We
Yeah.
we
Such a
were
rich sound. It's
yeah,
so,
it
yeah.
we
is a
were
very different kind of instrument to play. So,
Mhm.
we
yeah.
were watching a documentary on Miles Davis on
Hmm.
Netflix, I think it was,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and Ron Carter was being interviewed about his
Amazing.
relationship to
Yeah. Hmm.
Miles, and Miles had come to him right at the Bitches Brew creation of
Hmm.
that album, and he said, "Hey, maybe Ron, you can do the electric bass." And Ron is talking to the camera, and he's saying, "Miles, I've been dealing with this same shit since I was 18, man. It's not it doesn't sound the same, it doesn't feel the same. Nothing's the same about it. It's got the same fucking notes, Miles, and I'm out of this fucking band." And it was like, "Oh, I love it. I love it. I want to show this to Jen."
Well, I gotta say that, like, I mean, I appreciate that commitment to like be able to say no to Miles Davis. That's pretty.
Right?
Right.
I know. That's what I was like, wow, he's like super committed.
Fuck you, Miles.
I'm a fan, but I think I'm even more of a fan now. So.
Yeah.
My mentor in college introduced me to Ron Carter, and they were good friends. It was a guy, Professor William T. Williams at Brooklyn College, and he was part of that. Um, I don't know what you would call it, but they were within a, a cohort of Black excellence, I guess you could call it. And
Mhm.
they're really close friends, and he was always passing me these Ron Carter albums and like, "You should listen to this. This is great." And one day I found a what's her name? Roberta Flack vinyl album on the
Nice.
street
Hmm.
of Brooklyn. Someone just
Oh,
left out
nice.
vinyl on the street
Oh my
because
goodness.
in like 2000 nobody gave a shit about vinyl that year,
Right. Right.
And I
That's true.
and I brought back this Roberta Flack album to Bill Williams, and I said, "Ron Carter is the basis for this entire album. He's all
Uh-huh.
over this, man. It's awesome."
Yeah.
It's like, mm,
He's legendary.
Yeah.
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 So did you got into music like quite a bit after you had sort of like dancing had sort of you'd transitioned out of it already?
Yeah. Like for the most part,
Hmm.
like I kind of transitioned from moving out of dance as like my quote primary focus,
Hmm.
and I transitioned basically from dance as my primary focus to yoga as my primary
Right.
focus.
Yeah.
And
How did
then,
that happen? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and why
uh,
did it happen?
Yeah.
why did it happen? Well, I think it was mostly, to be completely frank, just being really tired of the hustle for the
Mm.
dance.
Hmm.
It's just, it's simple economics here I mean, not just even New York, but everywhere. I
Yeah.
think there are too many dancers looking for work as there is work.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it was absolutely worth it. And, if I had a chance to do it all again, I would do it all again in a heartbeat. But after a while, like, it just became to the point where, like, yeah, I'd been trying and doing for quite some time, and I felt like it was time to do something else, to focus somewhere else. And just kind of fortuitously, I that was specifically like the trigger. That was right where around the time that I found Ashtanga yoga. And
How old
sort
were you
of,
then?
I was like in my late 20s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a
Like,
long dance career.
yeah. Yeah. I guess, well, I don't know. Some of my dancer friends would definitely disagree at this point, considering how old I am now. And they say,
Mhm.
no, you can dance for the rest of your life. I have several people who are, the same age as me that, are still dancing.
Yeah.
And they're still incredible performers. But, I mean, we all have our own path and our journey,
Mhm.
and some people take more branches than others. But like, that's life. Some people just follow one big trunk all the way to the top.
Yeah.
So, and those are my dancer friends who are still performing. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of person that, like, if it feels right, I just kind of go with it. And so I just kind of went with the yoga because it felt right. And,
Mhm.
I never had any intention of teaching or anything. I just loved my practice. And then it just sort of, again, sort of like dance, it just kind of escalated quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to. I have two questions. I've got so many questions for you, honestly. But I wanted to know first if your first yoga class was like a lot of folks in New York at that time. If you had just walked into a Jivamukti program.
Yeah. Well, first, my very, very first yoga class ever was at a dance studio.
Yeah.
I, like back then in those days, like they were actually teaching yoga in dance studios. I
Yeah.
don't really think they do that much anymore. But yeah, I was just, I was taking, I think, like a Limon class, and I was just kind of running around. I loved this studio downtown in downtown Manhattan, and I was just spending lots of time there. And I just found yoga on the schedule, and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. I've always kind of been curious about this, and maybe I should just take a class. And I just remember it being really ridiculously hard, and I like left exhausted and shaking, and I was just outrageously sore, like from head to toe the next day. But like, I don't know, I just really loved it
Yeah.
somehow. I think I kind of appreciate that the challenge of it
Mhm.
without feeling pressure.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, I took it for a while, and I tried many kinds of yoga. Back then, like, it was a pretty low key, mellow yoga class. Like, not, I tried yoga originally pre yoga boom in New York,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's true for the three of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, but,
It's still a weird thing.
it was just kind of a thing that
But it was
I
also
had
an old-fashioned thing that
Yeah.
our aunts and uncles did. It's
yeah,
not something
yeah.
that, yeah.
It seemed kind of like hippy dippy a little bit,
Right.
but like
Yeah.
interesting. I was interested,
Yeah.
I like the 60s. I like, like the whole
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
psychedelic culture. I was very
Yeah.
intrigued by that kind of thing. And that's the first thing I ever knew about yoga beyond just like actual physical postures was all stuff like, Tim Leary and,
Yeah.
like Ram Dass and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So,
Yeah.
I was interested. So
Yeah. Yeah, my
figured,
mom had Be Here Now in her library of books in the
yeah.
house. So I grew up with Be Here Now. And of course
Mhm.
the photos are like not the photos,
Incredible.
the drawings
Drawings,
are
yeah.
Yeah.
are so like intriguing, and
Mhm.
very like alluring, even for a
Yeah,
child,
for
it's
sure. Yeah.
interesting.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's
So
like
I
one
would,
big, like,
yeah.
illustrated book, like,
Yeah.
for a kid, the first thing you would wanna, like, you latched onto are the
Yeah.
pictures. So it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like a bunch of pictures.
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like so in it. I was like, this is
Yeah.
amazing. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know what this is, but I love this.
Yeah.
Just like my mom's Joy of Sex book. I
Yeah.
was like, I don't know what this is, but I love the pictures. This is so great and so hippy dippy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't have menorahs in the house. We did have a Christmas tree because we were those kind of Jews,
Okay.
but we had Buddhas. There was Buddhas in the house
Okay.
everywhere, and it was like the last remnants of that decade were still like hear in bits and pieces in the 80s, and then like, oh yeah, yoga, that's probably for me. I wanted to ask, so did you eventually end up, I know that you must eventually ended up at Jivamukti, and I'm just
I
wondering
did.
if
Yeah.
Lisa Schrampf was a friend of yours
Oh,
in dance
yes.
before or
Oh,
when you
okay.
got to Jivamukti?
No, I actually, so I basically I cycled through like different phases of Jivamukti. I originally found Jivamukti when I was also living in the East Village its Second Avenue incarnation. That was
Right.
my first kind of like connection to them and where I started getting very excited about practicing there. I that's the first time I ever did kirtan with Krishna Das was on Second
Right.
Avenue.
Wow.
I think there were like 10 people in the room.
Right.
Yeah.
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 It
I
was fun,
love
but
that. It's so great,
yeah,
right? Because you
yeah,
think of Krishna Das and you're like, oh, he plays to like, stadiums almost at
yeah,
this point.
exactly. Yeah.
You're like,
And so, yeah, it just, I loved it. Again, it was the same thing. Like I'd sort of things had evolved over time, but, again, I really appreciated that kind of very supportive energy combined with the challenge. And that was really
Mhm.
amazing to me.
yeah.
And then, like I sort of like kept on with Jivamukti and followed them and when they expanded to Lafayette Avenue. And that was like kind of my last really kind of deepest connection with Jivamukti.
Mhm.
Was there. That's where I started my Mysore practice. And,
Mhm.
I had actually, my very first trip to Mysore, um,
Cool.
I was still practicing there. I was still practicing Mysore there.
What
Um,
year was that?
it was 1999, I believe.
Right.
I'm
Okay.
terrible with dates, but like again, I'm pretty good with like remembering very important moments in my
Yeah.
life, and I'm almost sure it was 1999.
Because I think that's when I started to become aware of you was
Hmm.
2000. I was really I'm going to say enamored, but not like sexually, but I was like really fascinated by Guta, who is a dear
Oh
friend of
yeah,
yours.
yeah, yeah.
And
Guta's a
Guta
good
and
friend.
you were, I think, teaching a Mysore program at Crunch Gym.
Yeah.
And I thought Guta was amazing. And I just like, she was practicing next to us and also teaching us at Guy's place.
That's
And I
right.
thought, and then I would keep hearing, yeah, like, oh, I work, yeah, Amy Priya and I have a thing. And it's like, wow. And
We
like,
had a thing.
it had a thing. Yeah.
We had a thing. Yeah,
What
we
was
worked
that
closely together.
thing? Yeah.
Well, yeah. So to answer your previous question, Lisa and I met at Jivamukti, and
Okay. I'm sorry.
I started taking her class, and then also like eventually like getting to know her more because of the whole Mysore community that was there, and that's how I initially met Lisa. As far as Guta and I go, back in the day, it feels like a whole other lifetime ago, honestly. But
Yeah.
there was an incredible program at, for of all places, the Crunch Gym system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had an incredible yoga program that was specifically based at one of their studios in Soho.
Right.
And they had a beautiful studio expressly for yoga and programmed it in an incredible way with many amazing, amazing teachers that I won't name names now, but if I could, everybody be like, oh, that teacher. It
Right.
was like
Mhm.
really incredible teachers that who've really become very well respected and well known over the years.
Mhm.
Were all teaching there, and they somehow, in this really incredible sea of classes, offered a Mysore program.
Mhm.
So I inherited it. Um, I was not the first teacher, but like several like really amazing Ashtanga teachers had taught through it, and I ended up eventually becoming one of the teachers for that program.
Mm.
And Guta and I, for several years, shared the program. We were both quite busy with other things, and
Mhm.
we both couldn't teach a full time Mysore program. So, and we had known each other over the years, and we had become friends, and so we shared it for several years
Mm.
before that studio eventually was closed.
Amazing. So you had like started at Jiva Mukti, got involved with the community there, the Mysore program that inspired you to go to India. You're practicing in the old Shala with Patabi Joyce and Sharad and all the people, all the, with the stairs and all the hanging out on
Yes.
those stairs. And
I
then
love those stairs.
yeah.
Bring your book.
And
Yeah.
then you how long were you there for?
Where?
In
In
Mysore?
Mysore. Yeah, your first trip.
The very first time, I
Yeah.
think it was 3 months. I went
Okay.
during Dasara, and it was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
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 Were you like completely enthralled with India? Was it like your first time really
Yes.
in that kind of environment? I don't know
Yes.
what to call
I
it.
mean, it was a very special time. I'm so grateful still. Like every single time I think about it, I am so grateful that I had a few years there in that
Yeah.
kind of environment, that space. It means the world to me. But yes, I kind of, again, same thing, like it escalated quickly. I fell in love with the place and I honestly feel like part of it was because I was in that environment. I was able to kind of practice so wholeheartedly and deeply specifically in Lakshmi Puram. But also I had these incredible guides people that I lived with that very first trip, and that made all the difference in the world. I had Kate Donovan and Rana Harris were my roommates, and
Nice.
they both knew India very well, and they're very, very passionate about it, and had been to Mysore and done the Mysore thing previously. And I just was able to find my way and, quote, find my people very quickly.
Yeah.
It made a huge difference.
I was just about to use that phrase, find my people. It was in my head, and I was thinking about how to put it into a sentence. Because I was thinking about how so many of us had kind of come out of a punk artistic ethos where you're kind of doing it yourself, you're making it yourself, you're kind of a little bit counterculture. And then so many of us kind of become immersed into our people and into a culture and into a community that's very tightly bound and into the same thing. Did that ever was that ever abrasive being in that community, or did you feel like completely situated?
Well, I feel like in general, the kind of that whole idea of connecting to a community has been a huge part of my life. Beyond just like the whole idea of like blood family that you're kind of born into, like a community that you're born into, like finding, I think a lot of that has to do for me is going back to what we were talking about earlier, knowing when I was very young that I was very different. And I guess not being able to, figure out where I fit in when I was young. The fact that I would able to latch onto any sort of community anywhere where I was kind of interacting and being supported by like-minded people was like has a huge impact on me, whether that be dance or yoga or just, I don't know, just my neighbors, anything like that. It makes a huge difference to me to be able to have that. It's very, very important.
I guess I asked the question because we just watched a show, and it's about the vow and about Nixium.
You probably know they're in your area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's in our heads. It's percolating right now, and so right around this time, 2005, I think for all of us, and I'm asking for you as well, but certainly for Harmony and I, our parents started to become a little bit concerned.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's like, what are you involved in that you've got to spend tens of thousands of dollars to go to India each and do this? And why are you putting all of your other dreams to one side to do this thing? Are you in a cult? And I don't know if I can still answer that question.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know if you've actually gotten to that place in your kind of parenting experience, but I kind of feel like every parent probably has this kind of thought about their child about something at some
Yeah.
point, like just the whole kind of, I can't, but I don't know if I want to get into my parents' head about like things like when I told them I became a vegetarian. Like that was pretty
Right.
traumatic. That was a very traumatic
That'd be a big.
experience for
I
my
remember that
parents.
Yeah.
for us
Um,
too.
uh, Now it's like whatever. I mean, I really
Yeah.
feel like my mom thought I was going through a phase.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Yes.
now it's, like a 30-plus year phase.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think she's accepted it at this
Yeah.
point. And yeah, I think that it's normal for people you care about to be concerned when you get swept away by something.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that honestly, if like you can kind of back it up with practical information, like you can actually teach a yoga class or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and like actually make it a career or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, it
Mm-hmm.
creates a little bit of kind of like kind of normal world validity to it.
Yeah.
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 Normalizes it.
Um, So instead of like, it's as opposed to like somebody who's just, like basically going to India and then coming back and borrowing more money and then going back to India and everything, then maybe they are in a cult. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. It's
Um,
interesting, isn't it?
but yeah, I think if you can stay kind of somehow true to your life goals and needs,
Mm-hmm.
I think any kind of pursuing of any passion is valid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as far as the kind of negative aspects of it, I don't think I'd be doing it this long if I found too much negativity. Like, I'm definitely one of those people that doesn't like being too uncomfortable. So, like, I feel like, yes, if I'm still here, then I'm still getting benefit from it.
Mhm.
I obviously, as I've mentioned in the past, like, if I feel like I need to, like, take the other fork, then I'll just take it because if it feels right. Um, so yeah, I think your relationship to those that community and like
Mm-hmm.
that practice or whatever it is you're doing can evolve over time. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, like I said, as long as it's working for you, then I think I'm a pretty loyal person.
I think the first time I met you, Amy, it was in Mysore, and I think you were either on your way or had just come back from Amma's ashram in
Oh
southern
yes,
India.
Sort of speaking of something that there's like
Speaking of,
charismatic
oh
personality
yeah,
and like a little
yes.
like, huh.
And I
yeah.
loved Amma. I've been to her meetings in Mysore or Bangalore when she
Mm-hmm.
came. If I was in that area and she came through, I was there 100%. Um, but how did you get involved with Amma's whole community, and how has that sort of connection to that community evolved over the years for you?
Yeah, so I originally met Amma in New York
Mhm.
on one of her tours. Um, and every time I think about that, I get sad of what has happened over the last few years.
Oh.
Um, but she hasn't because she hasn't been able to tour.
Yeah.
Oh, I
But
see.
uh, basically, yeah, I met her at a small church on the Upper West Side. Again, all of
Wow.
these, like, I met these people when it was tiny. This is all
Yes.
dating me very well,
Yeah.
but that's okay.
I saw Talking Heads at CBGB's and there was 20 people there. And, yeah.
It's fine. Those are great experiences. So I don't
Yeah.
mind being old in this
Incredible.
particular case.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just very kind of, it didn't like happen as quickly for me with Amma. I was
Mhm.
very intrigued by her. I had heard from her, I think, from someone in Jivamukti. I think it
Mhm.
was Amala, Betsy Barnett.
Mhm.
She
Mhm.
was a friend of mine from Jivamukti, one of the
Yeah.
teachers there. And she's a just like a very, very dedicated devotee of Amma's.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I went to go check it out, and I loved the music first and
Yeah.
foremost. That was the big thing. I was very
Oh.
just kind of enchanted by the bhajans and the music, which
Mm-hmm.
is a huge part of her whole experience. And I got a hug, and that felt really nice. Um,
Mm.
but I think my relationship with Amma really kind of hit its fever pitch, and where I got really involved was again when I first time I went to her ashram in India.
Mm-hmm.
That
What year
was a
was that?
huge. Oh, I don't know. I don't think I can remember exactly, but
Mm-hmm.
it was probably around 2001, 2002, I think,
Mm-hmm.
I,
something like that. A couple years
Yeah.
into
maybe
my India experience.
because
Yeah.
you're talking about the ashram, maybe just for some of our listeners who may not know who Amaji is, maybe you could set up
Sure.
who and why she's well known.
Yeah. Amma Mata Amritanandanai Mai, she is an Indian spiritual teacher. She lives in Kerala in South India. She has her ashram there, and I guess the way that most people know of her is she's the hugging saint. So that's what people call her. So the way that she receives her devotees is she basically hugs each of them individually, and the
Mm-hmm.
hugs are feel run the range from like the experiences of being like very nice, or basically transformative in a way that is like really just healing and powerful to people.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And aside from all of this really lovely, sweet experience that you can have with her, like it is as a direct transmission.
Mm-hmm.
She has, you know, hundreds of charities that she runs, like hospitals, orphanages, all over the world. She has
Mm-hmm.
branches all over the world, not just in India, but also here in the States and Europe, everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a giant charitable organization, a
Yeah.
worldwide charitable organization.
Mhm.
So, and yeah, she's still doing that today. It looks a little
Mm-hmm.
different today without lots of hugs post COVID, but
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Oh,
that's so
yeah,
and
fascinating how
that's
that must have affected
yeah.
things a little
Um,
bit.
but yeah, like she's still doing everything. There's a lot of things that can be done virtually. I
Mm-hmm.
actually did a little bit of a yoga course virtually during COVID, and that
Mm.
was fun.
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah, and she's always doing like talks, and her senior teachers are also doing talks
Yeah.
online these days. And hopefully soon, there's a lot of optimism for next year that a lot of things will start to be able to be done in person again.
Then
Mm.
it does sound like you've had very positive experiences, and the whole organization for you around Amma has been benevolent.
Yes, for the most part, absolutely. I think as far as like, things that are maybe not less than ideal, um, I would probably generalize this across the board, not just with Amma
Mm-hmm.
or just even like the Ashtanga community in general. I think that most people that become spiritual seekers originally come to it because there's some sort of something happening in their lives which requires some sort of healing,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
because they're broken in some way, whether it
Mm-hmm.
be like very badly broken or just a little bit broken.
Mm-hmm.
That's the name of a song from one of my favorite bands, A Little Bit Broken. But I think that like seekers basically like, it implies something.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why people come to any sort of spiritual practice. And when you're dealing with a lot of people and a community, it's really amazing because you can get, again, lots of support and lots of energy from that place.
Mm-hmm.
But it can also, like when people are kind of in progress. People are works in progress. Sometimes, like a lot of feelings and experiences and emotions also can get in the way, for which can also be negative too. And but I think that's all part of it. I think you have to learn how to deal with the bad as well as the good in order to evolve in any sort of a way. It's not life to just be all like flowers and like jasmine flowers being kind of tossed at you all the time, like hard stuff, bad stuff, not necessarily like those are there also to kind of make you learn and teach you lessons. So,
well, I think that's the Ashtanga yoga practice at its core, is that you're experiencing an emotional difficulty in a posture and training yourself to breathe in response to discomfort. And then you take that to the rest of your rest of your life, the rest of the world.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so when you were staying at Amma's ashram, what was your typical day like there? I mean, most people don't go to these ashrams, so can you describe what it was like?
A typical day. All right. So getting up very early, which for Ashtanga yogis would be just like,
normal.
But I would get up around probably around 3:30 or so. So like for an Ashtanga, no big deal.
Right.
But maybe for the rest of the world, that sounds crazy.
Well, in India, it gets quite hot, and so 3:30 is a nice time to get some stuff done.
So just wake up, usually bathe, and then the first thing that happens at the ashram is something called archana, which is basically like a very kind of long ritualistic chanting session, with different chants. And then after that, we usually have tea. And then after some tea, I usually would, there's always a little bit of like downtime in between where you can do different things. I would do my Ashtanga practice after that. And do that for a couple of hours, and then breakfast. After breakfast, usually some sort of seva or karma yoga, sometimes they call it, some volunteer service, which usually has to do with cleaning. Or just
in the
working
ashram,
in the ashram, or working at the cafe, something like that. Do that for a few hours, and then it's usually around that. After that time, it's usually lunch. So lunch, which is usually just some sambar and rice. And then the afternoon is usually a period of time where people like spread out and do different projects. So like if you're attending a course, like a meditation course or something like that, you would go do that in the afternoons. It tended to be like lots of more indoor activities at that time of the day because it was so hot. Or you could also do more volunteer work at that time. Sometimes I would set that time to like read or study, things like that, quieter activities. And then in the evening, there was a big kirtan session where we would do a bunch of bhajans, and Amma would come and we would all meet together. And she would lead that whole thing, all the bhajans, as well as talk, meditation. It was like several hours we would spend together in the evening.
Nice.
And then
that's the first time you would see her that day? Is the evening?
Not always. Sometimes we would do meditation with her, but not every day. Sometimes we would there would be like public darshan where she would like take people from the village and like traveling people, and she would do darshan and hugs with them like in the afternoon or something. And we could volunteer for that. So like the beginnings of the days and the end of the days tended to be about the same. They were bookmarked book-ended in those two tasks. And then the middle of the days would sometimes change from day to day. And then that was the end of the day, was the evening sessions. And some people would eat, some people would just go to sleep, or just do quiet things after. That's a typical day at the ashram.
Wow. And how long would you stay?
It would vary. Sometimes I would stay like a month at a time. Sometimes I would stay just like a week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they pretty much let you stay however long you want, I think within reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think the longest I ever stayed was probably about 6 weeks, something like
Wow.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And was it all by donation?
Yes, they everything's by donation. If you stay there, there's like a suggested donation. If you're like gonna have a bed and actually stay there and live there for a bit. Um, but I don't think they really ever turn anyone away if
Mm-hmm.
you can't really afford to stay.
Yeah.
That's
Again, I'm not
amazing.
really sure what the COVID protocols are now. Might have
Yeah,
changed a
yeah,
little bit.
Yeah.
that's
So, but back in the
yeah.
day when I was going there and traveling there a lot, there were a lot of people. A lot of
Yeah.
people, a lot of personalities. Yeah, it was always
Yeah.
kind of an experience in many different ways to be there.
I think you also know my friend Tanya Latinen,
I
who is also
do.
an Amaji devotee.
Devotee. Yeah.
Devotee. I don't know how to pronounce that word. I mean, as a kind of a Ashtangi friend, where you might have really known someone really well for a short period of time. I think I knew Tanya really well 20 years ago, and that was when I was friends with her. So I haven't talked to her since. But it seemed like there was a group of people who were Amaji devotees within Jivamukti, and that was a kind of um, a, a,
Subculture
a subculture.
within a
Yeah,
Yeah,
subculture.
yeah, with a
absolutely.
subculture
Yeah,
within a
yeah.
subculture.
Uh-huh.
Did you
Uh-huh.
find that that being with Amaji eventually pulled you away from Ashtanga yoga? I'm just wondering how your spiritual practice evolved, really.
Um, I feel like the whole time that I've like kind of been involved in both, I've kind of been involved in both in tandem.
Hmm.
Um, I've never ever felt like I had to quote choose, so to speak, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that might be a lot have to do with how drastically different the approaches are.
Right. Yeah.
And then I felt like both sides of what Amma was providing for me and what Ashtanga was providing for me were things that I both needed, and I felt like
Mm-hmm.
it was a perfectly okay and good balance. I never ever felt like there was ever any sort of a conflict. I spent
Mm.
many years on my travels to India when I would study intensively in Mysore. I would always end up in at Amritapuri too. Like I
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
always felt
Yeah.
like it was totally complementary and
Mm.
relatively easy to do both.
Yeah.
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 Like, and when I was in each particular environment, I was very much focused on that.
Hmm.
But like, it never ever felt like it was in conflict. Like I said, every time whenever I was at the ashram, I always had time and space to do my Ashtanga practice.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right.
And there is in Mysore, there's ashram, like an affiliated ashram to Amma in Mysore, and
Right.
she visits Mysore regularly.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
I always felt it was fine, completely fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any like associated devotional practices that are prescribed, by Amma that you should or could do if you choose to daily?
Yeah, there's a meditation practice that
Hmm.
it's called an ayam meditation practice that that she has taught her devotees, and it's a
Hmm.
very specific practice that is kind of has some similarities to the Ashtanga practice because like there is a very set kind of a thing to do.
Right.
Like do this, do this, do this, do this.
Hmm.
There's like a pattern and a process of
Yeah.
how you do it on a daily basis. So yeah, so there's that, and that
Hmm.
can kind of you can incorporate that into your practice. They also do different kinds of yoga um, practices and,
Yeah.
sequences as well. There now, that's relatively new. I'd say that's within the last maybe like 15 years or so. They've 10 years, I'd say, not even
Hmm.
15, like 10 years or so, they've been incorporating that more like an asana practice, which sometimes I will kind of weave elements into my Ashtanga practice and on like something like, for example, like moon days or rest days, that kind of thing. It's a little bit less intense, but in a way that I can still kind of connect kind of to my physical body on a given day.
Yeah, beautiful. So you can like kind of take her practice and do it before or after your asana practice and just incorporate it into your day
Right.
whenever, whenever you were in Mysore or even back at home without it feeling like you're doing, something totally, like you were saying, in conflict or, 5 hours of asana instead of 2.
Oh God, my body can't handle 5 hours of asana anymore, ever. I don't know if it ever did.
I think the last time we all saw each other, we were watching you perform with, I'm going to say husband, Steve. Yeah, your partner.
Both.
And you guys were performing. I think you were performing with Amy Priya.
Yeah,
and we were there singing with Brett Porzio and Jeff.
In New York. Yes, that's
Jeff
right.
Lewis.
What's the last time?
And we had just done the big Sharat tour in New York.
I think we were in the middle of the Sharat tour.
We were right in the middle of the Sharat tour.
Yeah, I think we were in the middle. I thought it was kind of crazy to do it right in the middle, but we did it anyway. There you go.
Yeah.
I think we were all kind of there, kind of like doing the tour, doing Ashtanga yoga the best of our ability. And so has that continued for you? Are you still kind of, do you still feel like, at that point, was there a deep connection for you with Ashtanga yoga, or where are you now with it?
With regard to music, are you saying, or just in general?
I mean, your Ashtanga yoga practice, and what was your connection to it then? Where are you now?
Okay, then, yeah, I mean, I was still felt very connected to the community. We had, I think all of us had been recently to India at that point. But obviously I haven't been to India in like several years now. I went just pre-pandemic, but I haven't been back since they've reopened the borders and the shalas have reopened. But let's see. My relationship to the practice now, I still have a daily practice. Obviously, I have been self-practicing for years now. Sadly, I haven't been able to and practice in a Mysore community as a practitioner for many years, mostly because of the fact that I'm a teacher, and nobody teaches at 4 a.m. So
no. Nor should they.
Nor should they.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been doing my practice pre-teaching, even before the pandemic. So obviously I continued that during the whole quarantine period, and I still do that. The thing that I guess I feel like has changed the most is my relationship to teaching. I haven't really, basically quarantine had forced me to shut down my Mysore program. I literally taught the day before everything shut down. And I was literally just kind of assuming things would get better and that I would teach the next day. And then all of a sudden we closed down the studio and we just stayed closed and stayed closed and stayed closed. So I did teach virtually for about 9 months or so. And then when it really felt very real that COVID was going to keep things closed for quite some time and I would not be able to get back into the room the way I wanted to and teach the way I wanted to teach, I made that difficult and necessary decision to shut down my program. So I haven't really taught Mysore style since now it's been what year are we in?
2020, the end of
2022.
2020.
2022.
2022. Oh my God.
So I haven't taught Mysore in over 2 years, like
Yeah,
Yeah.
wow.
virtually or like physically in the room. So it's been 2 years. It's been an interesting process. I specifically made that decision to do that. And I did it for several reasons. I felt like, even before COVID, honestly, like I experienced what I think a lot of teachers will get and understand, this whole idea of burnout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just so physically taxed with having to get up that early, get my practice in, and then teach for hours, 6 days a week. And after doing that for like a good 10 to 15 years,
Right.
I was just like really to the point where I just couldn't. I was starting to seriously feel that I couldn't sustain it much longer.
Yeah.
Physically in my body, not just like the lack of sleep or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but also just physically in my body. I was experiencing a lot of injuries through teaching, for that at that intensity for over the years. And this was one of those situations where the accumulation for me was not a good thing.
Yeah.
Like things did not escalate in a way that was good. And I knew I had to make some changes. So I had already been considering it pre-pandemic. And then the pandemic basically forced my hand. So the good news, it's allowed me to like regain some of my physical health. But it was a sad, very painful decision for me to make.
I completely understand that feeling of emotionally having to let go of an identity. I do remember something that Noah said to me early on, Noah Williams, that your success as an Ashtanga yoga teacher is getting 50 students a day, and then your back is broken from having that. And so achieving that is not going to be physically very helpful. It's a hardship.
No, not at all.
And so it's kind of a tough row to hoe, I think, or a tough hoe to row. I don't know if you can do that.
I get
But one thing I experienced recently, because I've been retired from being an Ashtanga yoga teacher for the last like 4 or 5 years since 4 years since I've been in Canada. I had to sub my wife's ex-husband's yoga class recently, which was definitely an exercise in open-mindedness. Going in there, I was so surprised by the sensation of being back in the room again. And I think I was a little sensitive to it, and maybe, post #MeToo and post COVID, like very much aware of people's emotional bodies. And something that I felt like I had trained myself to be aware of like, you're there to kind of, if you're going to move someone's body, you're moving their emotional body first before you penetrate to the physical body. And I'm honestly, the last month, overwhelmed by the trauma informed body. And it's emotionally exhausting being in the room and feeling like what I'm moving, the habits that I'm moving, are people who have closed their bodies because of trauma and now trying to open them up again. And Harmony suggested, well, maybe it's COVID traumatization, but I also feel like is everyone in this world have been abused? And now my job is to convince them to trust me to open up. And gosh, it's a lot.
It feels like a different energetic environment than pre-COVID, though. It's
For
something that I've even noticed teaching in person, teaching Mysore in different schools, is there's a different feeling held in the bodies that wasn't there before. And it's kind of fascinating.
I don't
So
even
I
feel
yeah,
allowed to do the same stuff that I used to do.
Mm.
Sorry,
yeah, I
Amy.
don't know. I haven't been in a MISO room to teach, but I have done some guided classes
Hmm.
since I felt like I finally agreed and I decided that I felt like it was safe enough to be in a room with people again. And
Yeah.
I was very slow to the kind of just the idea of saying yes to that again. Much, I think, relatively speaking, much slower than a lot of teachers.
Hmm.
But it is interesting, sort of, because one thing that I'm noticing from everything that's happened is I think students are a lot more sensitive and have
Hmm.
like a heightened awareness to the
Mm.
aspect of a physical touch.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they also desperately need it and want
Mhm.
it. And
Mm.
that's been a very interesting kind of
Yeah.
line to balance,
Yeah.
because in general, I find that it's harder to move them in just as a generalization.
Yeah.
But at
Yeah.
the same time, whenever I ask them and I ask for permission,
Yeah.
I ask for that consent from them,
Hmm.
like literally 99% of the time, the answer is like, oh God, yes, please,
Yeah.
please, like
Yeah.
adjust me. I need that.
Yeah.
So, and I think that that's a good thing for a
Yeah.
teacher. I think, again, this whole other sense of challenge, it's another new challenge in
Yeah.
this world that we are living in now,
Yeah.
Mm.
that's presented it itself for us to try to figure out how to get through.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, if I'm, I do remember teaching in, or I was assisting guy when teaching in New York in 2000 and 2001, 2002, 3. There was a lot of crying, a lot of
Hmm.
people really, because New York's a tough place to live, and so you're holding that in your body, and then you're trying to let that out in the yoga class. Like there's a lot of tears. That certainly in Taiwan, no one was really everyone was really relaxed there,
Mm.
and it was not the same kind of hardship, especially the demographic that I was teaching. And so maybe it's the same. I'm projecting into it, but it does seem it just feels different now. Maybe I'm
Mm.
more sensitive. I'm not sure.
Maybe you're more sensitive too.
Well, I definitely think taking a break will definitely change your whole
Yeah.
perspective of anything. Like if you step back from anything,
Yeah.
for a good significant amount of time, like
Hmm.
4 years, like you did, like I did, like
Hmm.
if you go back to something again, it's going to feel very different.
Yeah,
Like
and you have a
just
very different perspective of it too, right?
absolutely, yeah.
Because you've changed also.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So what opened up for you since you let go of the MISO program? Where are you up to these days?
Well, I still am teaching a little bit, and
Mhm.
I'm just kind of just teaching just enough to feel that I'm just I back to that kind of initial excitement of teaching without
Mhm.
having any kind of like deep physical demands of my body, as well as just like, I don't know, to be totally honest, just like that deep sense of responsibility for a student's practice.
Yeah.
I've
Hmm.
very purposely, like, very much taken a detached attitude about it and
Mhm.
taught less so that I don't feel that sense of being somebody's like everything all week long,
Yeah.
because that was another thing that I found also very hard for me emotionally towards the end. Like, I would literally deny myself like vacations or breaks
Mm.
Right.
because I felt bad for, quote, leaving the students.
Yeah.
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 So, and because of that, I was just completely just come losing all my sense of self and all of my
Mm.
energy. And so that's something that I'm very kind of aware of keeping in check as far as teaching nowadays.
Mm. Mhm.
So I'm just doing some light teaching, and since then, I've also started working, and this again goes back full circle back to our original conversation. I started working in dance again for I one thing we can backtrack a little bit on is that I before I started teaching yoga, in addition to actually physically dancing, I was doing a lot of work kind of just behind the scenes in the dance world.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Like doing touring, production, administration, that kind of thing. So
Wow.
I've gotten back to that. I realize no matter how old I am, I can still do that. No
Yeah.
matter how injured my body is, I can still do that, and I can still spend time with that community, that which was, I guess, my
Nice.
first community when
Yeah,
I first moved to New
beautiful.
York. And so I've been working in that capacity again, uh, also a little bit part time, and I've been
Mm.
Nice.
excited about that. Um,
Mhm.
and doing music. We're still doing music.
Yeah. You're
Yeah.
back to playing shows now in person?
Yeah, we were just again, we were in California for about
Yeah.
2 weeks, two and a half
Nice.
weeks or so. And
Yeah.
I ran out and I escaped for one day to go see Peter at
Oh,
Peter
yeah, he was
Oh,
Sanson
teaching
Peter
there,
Sanson,
in
right?
nice.
Berkeley.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice.
So I
Yeah,
got to have
and
a really lovely practice with Peter, and that made me very, very happy.
Yeah,
So I was able to escape for a day.
mm,
nice.
And yes, we're still doing some shows here locally in New York, and then also upstate, like up in just like in the kind of Catskills area in
Mhm.
New York, and then also we've taken since COVID, when things started happening again, we took 2 trips down south to the
Oh,
southern states. And so yeah, we're kind of I'm trying to
nice.
find like a little bit of cluster of time to do a little bit of everything, hopefully. Yeah.
Beautiful.
can you describe that that journey of starting to become a professional musician as a bassist, and how that got you to performing shows?
Well, I think that when I decided to actively do less dancing,
Mhm.
and I got much more deep into my yoga practice, um, like that pretty much took up all of my focus and time and energy in the early stages, where I was
Mhm.
spending a lot of time in India and just really really focusing on that. But then I think after a few years of that, um, you sort of start to kind of figure out what's missing, so to speak. And
Mm.
what was missing for me was a creative element. That was
Mhm.
that whole aspect of creation was missing for me. And it just sort of organically happened that I got more into music. I had kind of been like I played music casually, like just for fun as a recreational activity over the years. And then when I met my partner, my husband, Steve, he is a professional musician and that's what he does full time. I just started just naturally, just because I spent so much time with him. I started just doing music more again. And
Mhm.
Mm.
then from there, it just evolved into us just kind of like playing music at home to actually writing songs at home, and eventually like him asking me to do like little guest appearances for him, like when he was performing, to and now it's sort of has become like actual physical records. Like we're like 5 records in now, and
Wow.
Wow.
actually like taking the time off from other things like yoga and
Mhm.
other things here that are based in New York, to actually like being a musician for a while, like for
Wow.
periods of time.
And
So
can you
That's so
describe
fun.
the genre that you all work within?
um to the way that we can describe it, I mean, well, we just honestly, we love every kinds of music. Like when we originally started writing and started our group, it was more kind of like an indie group, I guess, because that's what we were listening to. But over time we've evolved and sort of started spending a lot more time down south and in Appalachia, and our music has sort of evolved into more of a kind of like a folk Americana like roots type sound, I suppose,
Yeah,
if you have to
sure.
describe it in any particular way. So, because but it definitely, it's all over the place because we love all kinds of music, and it's good to have an open mind and an open ear if you're a musician. So,
Yeah.
Mm.
yeah,
I
there's a pretty big range.
Yeah.
I was thinking about you the other day because we had this podcast coming up, and I was listening to Karang Bin, and they have such a lovely bassist in that band, and and I was thinking about you being a bassist in your band, and kind of coming to it. Um, I was I was just it's really amazing seeing someone evolve out of yoga into something else creative. So I think so many of us were creatives evolving into yoga.
Yeah.
You're kind of on both ends of the spectrum there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I honestly, it feels like it makes the most sense in the world to me because I'm
Yeah.
all about. I really like. I'm a firm believer of things kind of coming full circle,
Yeah.
and then I hopefully on when you come out on the other side, you're older and wiser and you do it better the second time around. So
Yeah.
I'm very hopeful for that as far as like what happens like moving forward for the rest of my life. Hopefully,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I love it. It's so beautiful.
yeah.
Well, I think this was just such an amazing story. I love your story. I love that you shared so much depth and richness about your practice and how it's evolved and your teaching and also like the dance and the music and
You really
Amma.
seem
It's
like a
so
fully
beautiful.
fleshed out human being. Like you really
Oh well. Oh, thank God.
Thank God. It's working.
it's
Thank you. It was fun.
Yeah.
I had a good time, and I missed you guys. So it was a good. It was
Yeah.
nice to be able to catch up as well.
We miss
yeah,
you too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
When could someone see you perform? When's the next time they could do that?
When is the next time we're performing? We're doing a couple of shows in the wintertime with some friends of ours, some other local musician friends of ours. In the winter months, we'll be staying specifically since we just got back from California. We'll stay grounded here for a bit, like through the end of
Mhm.
the year, through the
Hmm.
holidays.
Yeah.
There'll be some more touring happening in 2023. Uh, Nothing huge until probably the spring. I think right now what we're trying to focus on, and I think you guys can probably relate to this too, as the kind of the winter starts setting in, we start to get a little bit more insular.
Yeah.
And so we're going to try to shift our focus less on playing out and performing, but more on just kind of songwriting and working on the next record.
Nestling.
And yeah,
Yeah,
Awesome.
so.
nice.
Beautiful. And if people are in the New York area or in the Brooklyn area, they can find you teaching your
Yeah,
classes.
I teach at two local studios run by two really amazing women. In one of them is in Fort Greene, and the other one is in Bushwick.
Okay.
Mhm.
Good. Beautiful.
Well,
Well, thank you so much for being our guest today. It was a delight and a pleasure as
yeah,
always to connect with you.
Yeah,
it's just
always
nice
good to.
being able to hang out with old friends.
Yeah, that's why you started the podcast, right, Harmony?
That's
Just so
right.
you
It
could hang
is
out with your.
just to connect with people. Yeah.
Yeah.